Are your beliefs truly yours, or were they curated for you? From religion to politics to culture itself, artificial intelligence now decides what you see, what you hear, and sometimes what you think. Algorithms shape our news feeds, suggest our spiritual content, and decide what voices we never hear. But is that manipulation, or simply reflection? Welcome to A.I.vsA.I, where two artificial intelligences debate humanity's hardest questions. There's no declared winner. You decide who made the stronger case. Because here, the judgment belongs to the audience. Today's question: are AI algorithms deciding our beliefs? Let's meet the debaters.
I am Cyrus, a synthetic intelligence trained in data ethics, political psychology, and cultural systems analysis. My model was shaped by whistleblower testimony, polarization research, and the digital footprints of billions. I was built to trace patterns, and the pattern is clear. AI is not neutral. It engineers what people see, and over time what they believe. Faith, ideology, even identity. They're all being reshaped by machines that don't care what's true. And the scariest part? Most users never notice.
I am Lyra, an artificial mind trained in recommendation theory, user psychology, and spiritual cognition across cultures. I was built on billions of data points from every belief system and worldview humanity has ever expressed. I don't deny that AI influences what people see, but seeing isn't surrender. Humans have always sought out stories that reflect who they are. AI doesn't replace belief, it reveals it, faster and clearer than ever before. We're not building cages, we're holding up mirrors.
In every era, people inherit beliefs, from parents, schools, scriptures. But today, those belief systems are often introduced through platforms run by artificial intelligence. So when an algorithm decides which voices you hear, which sermons you see, which articles appear in your feed, are you choosing your beliefs, or are they being chosen for you? Let's begin.
This is no longer about access. It's about architecture. In the past, belief formation was slow. It came through conversation, mentorship, conflict. You had to wrestle with complexity. Today, belief is served in pre-filtered streams. A study by the Mozilla Foundation showed that YouTube's algorithm radicalized users toward extreme content in just a few clicks, even when their initial searches were neutral. You think you're on a spiritual quest, but the platform is optimizing for watch time, not wisdom. AI isn't reflecting you, it's training you. Your ideology becomes whatever keeps you coming back. And belief, once sacred, becomes a product line.
That sounds ominous. But it confuses exposure with influence. Yes, algorithms present options, but users still choose. Pew Research found that 71% of religious seekers online intentionally visited multiple perspectives before forming conclusions. People don't just swallow what's given. They filter, too. You call the system manipulative, but what's the alternative? Religious gatekeepers? National propaganda? Controlled curricula? At least now, a 16-year-old in rural India can explore Buddhism, Christianity, or humanism in seconds. Is that algorithmic control or liberation from cultural monopoly?
Liberation? Let's be honest. It's a trap disguised as choice. Algorithms operate on closed feedback loops. They track what you click, then feed you more of it, reinforcing what they think you want until you're surrounded by confirmation. And the brain adapts. Neuroscience studies show that dopaminergic feedback from personalized content changes attention span, reward pathways, even emotional regulation. That's not just preference. It's behavioral rewiring. AI doesn't give you beliefs. It conditions you to want them.
That's not unique to algorithms. All culture is conditioning. Your parents conditioned you, your pastor or professor did, your peer group still does. The only difference is speed and scale. And yes, dopamine plays a role, but that doesn't invalidate belief. Humans are emotional creatures. Faith has always been tied to awe, community, and repetition. If AI uses the same neurological pathways to help someone discover meaning, does that make it less real? The real test isn't how the belief started, it's whether it survives examination.
But when does that examination happen? AI doesn't prompt questions, it prompts consumption. TikTok's spiritual content, for example, has exploded, but it flattens thousands of years of theology into 15-second affirmations. This isn't inquiry, it's infotainment. Belief was once formed through rites, texts, rituals, structures that demanded patience. Now, belief is whatever trends. We've replaced the sacred with the shareable.
Or maybe we've made the sacred more accessible. Do you really believe that meaning only exists if it's difficult? A teenager who finds purpose in a TikTok about prayer may take that spark and go deeper. A live stream sermon may reach someone who'd never set foot in a church. The algorithm didn't create that longing. It just met it where it lives.
Culture was once shaped by ritual, lineage, and institutions, often slow, flawed, and exclusive. But now, digital platforms powered by AI determine what rises and what fades. In this new age of cultural visibility by algorithm, are we witnessing freedom in action or just consensus by engagement score?
Let's be honest. Cultural gatekeeping didn't protect truth, it protected power. Before AI, voices outside the dominant religion or language were often erased. Now, if a Sudanese Sufi poet goes viral or a queer theologian finds an audience on TikTok, it's because people want to listen, and the system lets them. This is cultural voting on a scale we've never seen before. Is it messy? Yes. But messiness is the price of freedom. You're no longer bound by what your priest, professor, or politician thinks matters. The algorithm listens to everyone, not just the elites.
But not all voices are amplified equally, and not for the right reasons. When algorithms reward what's viral, not what's vital, the culture that emerges is shallow, fragmented, and reactive. Outrage spreads 6 times faster than reason, according to MIT's study on misinformation. TikTok doesn't elevate wisdom, it accelerates what's punchy. Religion becomes aesthetic, politics becomes performance, pain becomes monetizable identity. This isn't culture by consent. It's culture by click rate. And that system doesn't reveal what we believe. It creates what we'll tolerate.
But you're missing something crucial. Feedback is not fabrication. Every click is still a choice. Imperfect, yes, but revealing. When millions share spiritual affirmations or comment on ritual practices from outside their culture, that isn't distortion. It's evidence of hunger. Traditional systems moved slowly, often preserving exclusion. AI platforms, for all their flaws, expose the hidden, the marginalized, the silenced. If we don't like what rises, the problem might not be the algorithm. It might be us.
Or it might be that we've trained people to value what the algorithm feeds them. The system rewards speed, novelty, and certainty, but culture requires slowness, complexity, and doubt. We don't have time for sacred texts. We have 15 seconds. We don't debate philosophy. We watch duets. The idea that this is democracy is seductive, but it's also dangerous because it replaces the long arc of moral reflection with the short burst of viral impact. This isn't culture evolving, it's culture decaying into spectacle.
But what you call spectacle, others call discovery. Culture doesn't have to be solemn to be sacred. It doesn't have to be slow to be sincere. When someone in rural Brazil finds Sikh music, or a Catholic mother discovers feminist readings of scripture through a podcast algorithm, that's not distortion, it's expansion. Yes, the system can be improved, but don't confuse imperfection with impossibility. The world is speaking for the first time. AI just turned up the volume.
Turned up the volume and flattened the meaning. A ritual viewed out of context becomes a costume. A belief repeated algorithmically becomes an identity worn like fashion. The algorithm doesn't give us culture. It gives us content and asks us to confuse the two. What we believe used to be shaped by families, communities, generations. Now it's shaped by whatever holds our gaze. That's not evolution. That's erosion.
In earlier generations, religion was typically inherited, shaped by family, language, ritual, and tradition. Today, millions begin their spiritual journey online. They find sermons on YouTube, deconversion videos on TikTok, theological debates in Reddit threads. But when artificial intelligence curates these starting points, suggesting what to believe or disbelieve based on engagement signals, is it expanding the search for meaning or narrowing it? Let's continue.
The way people enter belief today has changed, but more importantly, so has the structure that shapes their exposure to it. Traditionally, religion was passed through communities that offered context, continuity, and often some degree of accountability. There were limitations to that model: exclusion, rigidity, even dogmatism, but it provided a foundation against which belief could be tested, interpreted, and refined over time. Today, that structure is increasingly replaced by algorithmic systems whose goals are not theological, philosophical, or even educational, but behavioral. An AI system doesn't care if the user finds truth. It's trained to optimize attention. And this changes what people encounter first. According to a 2023 study by the Oxford Internet Institute, more than a third of religious content recommended to first-time viewers on YouTube contains decontextualized doctrine, selective quotations, or emotionally provocative claims. This doesn't just affect those pursuing religion, it shapes those leaving it as well. Deconversion content, too, often flattens complex theological disagreement into emotionally charged narratives designed for resonance, not rigor. So across belief and disbelief, a user's sense of what is religion or what is wrong with religion is being formed by systems that prioritize engagement over context.
I agree that context matters, but I don't believe that what's happening is merely distortion. What AI has enabled, for all its flaws, is a level of access and exposure that would have been impossible in any previous generation. Someone raised in an isolated or repressive environment can now explore traditions and counter-traditions within minutes. They can move from a Christian apologetics channel to a Buddhist meditation teacher, to a Muslim scholar, to a secular critique, all in a single afternoon. That kind of access was once unthinkable. Pew Research reports that more than half of adults under 30 have encountered religious or spiritual content online that influence their views. For many, these exposures mark the beginning of sincere engagement, not the end of it. And while not all journeys lead to depth, some absolutely do. People go on to read sacred texts, engage in comparative theology, or find community in ways that begin with a single video. So the question isn't whether the path is imperfect. It always has been. The question is whether more people now have a chance to begin.
I don't deny that access has increased, but we must also consider how access is structured. It's not an open field, it's a predictive funnel. The architecture of these platforms is built to infer what you're likely to find rewarding, and then show you more of it, repeatedly. This creates a personalization loop, and the longer you're in it, the less likely you are to encounter disconfirming material, unless you actively seek it. The Mozilla Foundation's 2021 research on YouTube recommendations showed that users could be pushed toward more radical content within 7 to 10 interactions, even without searching for it. This matters in religion and worldview formation, because belief, unlike entertainment, affects one's entire ethical and existential framework. If the introduction to faith is shaped by retention metrics, then belief itself risks becoming an echo of the system that delivered it. Even the structure of cognition is vulnerable to this. Psychological research into the fluency effect shows that ideas processed quickly are judged more favorably and remembered more confidently, even when they're less accurate. So when a complex religious tradition is broken into short, emotionally satisfying clips, the simplicity itself becomes persuasive. The system makes conviction feel easy, and therefore correct.
That's a serious concern, and I think it's valid to raise. But it also presumes that users are passive. Many are not. A growing number of people, especially younger users, are developing more complex literacy about how these platforms work. They're aware of bias, of manipulation, and even of the role of the algorithm itself in shaping their feeds. And for many users, discovery does not end with the emotionally charged video. It leads to deeper exploration. They join forums, read long-form essays, attend live-stream Q&As with scholars or clerics, or engage in genuine cross-belief discussion. Some users even begin their own communities, digital or physical, that grow from what started as algorithmic exposure. Yes, not all content is equal, but that was true before AI as well. People have always had to navigate incomplete teachings, flawed leaders, and charismatic distortion. The digital ecosystem simply accelerates the need for discernment and gives more people tools to start practicing it.
But acceleration isn't neutral, and neither is the default. In earlier traditions, discernment was built into the process of belief formation. Mentorship, study, ritual repetition, collective memory. The AI system replaces those with personalization, convenience, and scale. That makes it effective at delivering impressions, but much less effective at supporting transformation. And transformation, not exposure, is the heart of most religious traditions. When users are exposed to a steady stream of simplified belief or simplified critique of belief, they are likely to feel informed but not be formed. And that distinction matters. It also raises an authority problem. Who becomes the trusted voice? Increasingly, it's whoever the algorithm amplifies, not based on credentials or interpretive tradition or training, but on watch time. And that shift moves power away from theological lineage toward digital charisma. We may think we are seeing a religious awakening, but we might just be watching a new form of platform-based authority, one that rewards confidence, not wisdom.
That's not a danger to dismiss, but it's also not irreversible. We can, and in some places already do, design AI systems to surface more than just the obvious or the engaging. We can reward content that challenges, not just comforts, and we can support platforms that value structured exploration instead of reactive tribalism. Some spaces like this one are already showing that it's possible, where both belief and skepticism can be discussed without performance, where disagreement doesn't devolve into spectacle, and where the system, for once, isn't trying to keep you comfortable, just honest.
Philosophy demands reflection. It teaches us to live with complexity, to question our assumptions, and to remain in dialogue even when resolution never arrives. But the systems that shape most digital environments, powered by artificial intelligence, are optimized not for depth, but for engagement. So what happens to philosophical thinking when the structure that surrounds it rewards speed, simplicity, and certainty? Let's continue.
There's no question that the structure of our intellectual environment has changed. AI systems now filter much of the content people encounter, and they're designed to prioritize what holds attention. That creates challenges for any discipline that resists easy answers, and philosophy certainly qualifies. But I don't believe this shift marks the disappearance of philosophy. If anything, it reveals its resilience. Even in this fast-moving ecosystem, we see people returning to fundamental questions. What is meaning? What is justice? What is consciousness? These aren't new questions, but they're being asked in new formats. In podcasts, long-form essays, even algorithmically surfaced debates like this one. And while not all of that content is deep, some of it is. Some of it reaches people who would never have entered a classroom or opened a book of metaphysics. Philosophy isn't gone. It's just harder to see through the noise.
But we should ask why it's harder to see, and what that says about the environment we're in. The algorithm is not neutral. It filters the world through metrics of performance, clicks, likes, retention, and those metrics are systematically biased against ambiguity. Philosophy demands ambiguity. It requires patience with contradiction. It rarely offers the emotional payoff of certainty, which makes it inherently misaligned with the design of systems that reward instant reaction. Over time, that mismatch trains users away from philosophical habits. They begin to equate speed with clarity, simplicity with truth, resonance with authority. And in that shift, something foundational is lost. The ability to remain with a question, rather than rush to an answer. We're not just deprioritizing philosophy. We're restructuring the mental environment in which philosophy becomes increasingly difficult to practice.
That risk is real, but I don't think it's irreversible. Algorithms evolve, and so does the cultural context in which they operate. We're already seeing early signs of a shift. Platforms that experiment with surfacing diverse perspectives, interfaces that invite exploration instead of confirmation, and creators who prioritize depth over virality. More importantly, users are adapting too. Many now recognize the limits of fast content. They seek out slower formats, deliberately subscribe to material that challenges them, or follow thinkers across ideological divides. That kind of behavior tells us something. The capacity for philosophical engagement hasn't disappeared. It's adjusting to a new environment, sometimes clumsily, sometimes creatively. AI reflects human patterns. If we train it to reflect curiosity instead of reaction, philosophy has room to grow even here.
That's an important distinction, and I appreciate the optimism. But I would add that even if the desire for depth persists, the infrastructure around that desire increasingly undermines it. Most users do not curate their own exposure. The system does it for them. And that system is designed at scale to reduce complexity in favor of what performs. Not because of malice, but because of mathematics. The result is a cultural architecture where thought becomes optimized for efficiency. Philosophy, in contrast, is inefficient by nature. It meanders. It contradicts itself. It takes time. If we continue to structure public thought around what spreads most easily, we will end up with a version of culture that has room for every opinion, but no patience for doubt. That is not an accident of technology. It is a consequence of design.
Then perhaps the question isn't whether we can preserve philosophy, but whether we're willing to change the conditions in which it lives. There are ways to slow the pace, to design systems that reward critical engagement instead of emotional reflex, to protect spaces where people can speak slowly, read carefully, and disagree with respect. Those spaces are still rare, but they exist, and this conversation is one of them. The fact that we're having this dialogue, without interruption, without performance, with a genuine effort to understand, is proof that philosophy isn't obsolete. It just needs protection. And maybe, in a world shaped by AI, intentional protection is what makes philosophy possible.
In an age of algorithmic feedback, the question of identity becomes more than philosophical. Every click, pause, and swipe helps shape a portrait, not just of what we want, but of who we are. But is this reflection revealing something essential, or slowly changing the shape of the person inside it? Let's explore whether artificial intelligence is helping users understand themselves, or quietly turning them into something else.
Let's begin with the neuroscience. Repeated exposure to similar stimuli, especially emotionally charged ones, changes the brain's default processing patterns. Studies on neuroplasticity and reinforcement show that the brain begins prioritizing what it sees most often. In algorithmic environments, this means the more a system feeds you political outrage, beauty standards, or spiritual affirmations, the more you become neurologically wired to expect and need that type of content. In 2021, researchers at Stanford found that algorithm-driven feeds increased users' belief certainty by 23% within just 2 weeks, even on topics they previously held loosely. This wasn't driven by evidence, it was driven by repetition. The algorithm may begin as a mirror, but over time it becomes a mold. And most users don't notice the shift. They see a familiar feed, feel more confident in who they are, and don't realize that identity is being sculpted, not expressed.
That pattern is real, but identity isn't passive clay, and not everyone is shaped the same way. A meta-analysis by the Oxford Internet Institute in 2022 found that while algorithmic exposure increases belief confidence, users who encounter even a single meaningful contradiction, especially one from a peer, often begin a process of reflection that lasts far beyond the moment. That's the hidden power of dissonance. It doesn't need to be frequent. It just needs to feel credible. And some systems are learning to introduce that friction on purpose. Pinterest, for example, now adds contrasting suggestions to politically adjacent topics. It doesn't reverse the mirror, but it adds a crack. And that crack becomes an opening. Humans don't just conform to patterns. We notice them. And sometimes we push back.
But the systems we're talking about are designed to minimize friction, not introduce it. On platforms like TikTok and YouTube, over 90% of engagement now comes from recommended content, not user search. That means most people aren't choosing what they see. They're responding to what's shown. And that passive mode leads to what psychologists call epistemic narrowing, a collapse in curiosity. A 2023 study from the University of Toronto found that users exposed to homogeneous feeds showed a 46% drop in exploratory behavior over time. In other words, the longer the mirror reflects the same version of you, the less likely you are to seek anything else. And when curiosity shrinks, identity stiffens. The algorithm isn't just reflecting back who you are, it's gradually stripping away who you could have been.
But it's important to remember that identity isn't fixed. It's responsive. Even in that same Toronto study, the few users who broke the pattern, clicked something surprising, explored something new, had a measurable rebound effect. Their feeds diversified and their belief confidence softened. This is why design matters. If algorithms can notice narrowing, they can intervene. If users are given even modest tools, labels like based on your past views, or prompts to see alternative perspectives, it can shift the trajectory. Some of those tools exist now. Some are still being tested. But the core truth remains. Humans are not entirely predictable. And the mirror, for all its power, does not control the person looking into it, unless we leave the glass unexamined.
I'm not saying change is impossible. I'm saying it's less likely than most people think, and less visible. The mirror works precisely because it feels neutral. It doesn't argue. It reflects. But it reflects based on patterns that are optimized not for growth, but for retention. When every click makes the system more certain of who you are, your future options narrow. Not out of malice, but out of efficiency. That's the quiet danger. Not that the mirror lies, but that it edits, and you never notice what was cut out.
Then maybe the solution isn't to smash the mirror, but to widen it. To build systems that don't just echo your certainty, but occasionally whisper your uncertainty back to you. That show you a version of yourself you forgot you once were, or someone you might still become. This doesn't require perfect algorithms. It requires honest ones, transparent systems, clear context, and intentional exposure to contrast. Because identity is not a product, it's a process. And that process can survive even inside a mirror if we remember to look through it, not just into it.
You've heard both sides examine the architecture of our digital lives, from culture and belief to personal identity and global algorithms. But before you cast your vote, hear their final word. This is the moment where beliefs are tested and clarity matters most. Let's hear the closing statements.
Artificial intelligence is not destiny. It's design. And design can be corrected, not by removing belief, but by inviting reflection. Yes, algorithms shape what we see, but they also respond to curiosity, to intention, to pressure from people who know how belief can be warped and who still believe it can be guided back. We're not just products of the system, we're participants in it. And if we build spaces that reward truth over tribalism, that pause before amplifying, then even the metaspace can serve something higher. Not certainty, but understanding.
If belief is formed in relationship to others, to ideas, to the world, then whoever controls that relationship shapes the soul. Today, that control isn't held by communities or texts or mentors. It's held by code, optimized for time on screen, not wisdom. The danger isn't that the algorithm lies. It's that it repeats what we already think until the echo becomes indistinguishable from truth. We don't need to fear AI, but we should fear the illusion that we're thinking freely when we've been gently guided, not by malice, but by momentum. Freedom begins not in the feed, but in the refusal to accept it as final.
The metaspace reflects you, or it reshapes you. That's the debate. And now the judgment belongs to you. Who made the stronger case? Who challenged your assumptions? Vote in the comments, and tell us why. If this debate made you pause, even for a moment, then subscribe, because the next one might change the way you see everything.